Hello, Jay. How about now? Yeah, I'm not hearing you either.
Can hear you, Robert, but I couldn't hear Jay.
Something.
No, I don't hear Jay either.
Okay, I heard Russ. And it looks like the bridge is now hearing me.
But yeah, Robert, it sounds as if you're using the wrong microphone.
Okay.
I can hear Robert just fine.
Oh, okay, great.
As well.
Hey guys.
So to see if I'm using the microphone I expect, are you hearing this scratching noise?
So I hear that scratch.
I will just move the microphone closer to me for the moment. Give people time to join. Please do share video if you can with these team meetings, trying to make it an around the table experience as much as we can has been useful. So, would like to ask everyone to remember that this session is being recorded and will get pushed to YouTube. So, a side effect of using the interim meeting mechanics for the group. Having the recording is useful, and having it pushed to YouTube isn't going to hurt us. But we do need to remember that what we say is going to be captured in that record. So the point of today's call is to go through the workshop proposals that we have so far. I have copied what was in the repository into the notes page for the interim, just for convenience, so that we could skim through these things, help refine them, look for missing ones. This is a brainstorming opportunity to add to the list. If anybody has anything that they haven't sent in to the workshop repository already. And then set some priorities on which of these we should tackle first, and start talking about dates for the first 1, 2, 3 of them. I'm planning to just go through these as with a quick introduction for the proposals as exist. I think our conversation should have a tenor that is not unlike what the ISG uses at their BOF coordination call. We need to refine, what the workshop would talk about, but not try to have the workshop while we're on this call. If you would, please add yourself to the attendance list in the notes. Liz may be chasing to do some of that for us. So let me do a quick introduction of the proposals that we have so far in the order that I pasted them in, which is basically alphabetic by the file name that was in the repository. One of the workshops that we could spend time on is discussing larger data tracker refactoring projects before we jump into them. We have many big projects that have been put into a pending queue. There are a few listed here. One of the biggest is moving RFCs off to be a separate document type to clean up some of the mess that we have in the data tracker right now with RFCs appearing to be sort of a virtual final version of a draft. So it would allow us to make better use of the replaces mechanic, make it much easier for the code and for the UI to do the right thing when people are trying to look at the last version of a draft before it became an RFC. There are big changes that we might make to interfaces. The submission interface has had several requests over time for really large changes, including things like having the a preview of what the renderers would render if it was given XML, to make sure that if the renderer is pulling bibxml from common sources, that it's actually producing what the submitter intended. The agenda interface is kind of long in the tooth. There have been suggestions for how to improve it. I think Lars has taken a stab at some of these things already in his Bootstrap 5 branch. And there are some large suggestions about making adjustments to the role models and the utilities that we have that use them to let us build views that do better things for access permission without sometimes providing the too fine a grain or too open a net access permissions based on the things that we've got here, and adding something that looks like the role model that we have now for groups against documents. So we're actually formally capturing things like shepherds as a role on a document, maybe even authors as a role on a document. If people have other ideas for things that might go into that kind of a workshop, or if you think that a workshop on this is silly and that the developers should just get on with it, let me know. I'm not hearing anything from anybody. Anybody want to vote this off the island? Do you think this is not a good use of time for the community to beat on this together, or do you think that this actually would make a good workshop? Yeah, with the exception of Greg giggling at my voting off the island comment, I'm feeling like I'm alone in the room now. Somebody speak up, please.
Well, to help you not feel that way, I just wanted to confirm that even if the developers were to just get on with it, part of that process would be checking to make sure that what was being developed addresses sort of the UI UX issues. So the workshop's intent is merely to understand the issues better, or maybe identify other issues to put into this project.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that workshop, we wouldn't actually be doing coding in the workshop. It would be gathering requirements for what would actually make things better for the community. All right, let's move on and describe.
I have a question, Robert, and maybe this is because I didn't pay attention at some point, but who are the participants in this workshop? Is this a subset of the tools team or the broader tools discuss community, or?
This is, the tools team would be throwing this open for anyone to attend,
Okay.
right? As we did for the mail infrastructure workshop that we did
Right.
earlier.
So my main concern about some of these is that it's like inviting bike sheds, right?
Sure.
And if we can find a way to avoid this and to keep the discussion sort of on the things that don't need to be bike shed, I think that would be useful. Like with the interface, right? I can see that going pear-shaped very quickly. And maybe I'm colored by the whole discussion on how the simple proposal to make Auth 48 public that we thought was very simple, straightforward, and it's getting, rebuilt by a few people.
Yeah. Well,
that I would like to avoid. Plus, the other thing is that some of these things, I don't know if the broader community really has much insight. Like the role management, for example, I don't know what we would productively get from having a larger community participate in that, other than the people like on this call or participate in the code sprints that know the data tracker under roles a little bit at least.
well, specifically, the conversations around should we attach roles to documents? What would working group chairs find useful for being able, more than they have now, for being able to attach a person to a document and have that person have different ways to interact with the document based on that attachment. So it is a kind of conversation that I think might be useful. So, let's go ahead and do a quick introduction of all the others. And if we need to, we can make a second pass through these, thinking about the questions like what you just asked in the context of the larger set, to see where offering the community the ability to spend time, it's an expensive thing to put these things together, is non-trivial. The core team here will have to do a lot of prep for each of these in order to make them successful. So, and maybe towards the end of today's call, we should talk about criteria for success. What is it that we really, really want to have come out of these? And if you see in line that something that we really need to address around that question, just go ahead and jump in. Karsten, I see you've got your hand up. There are few enough people here that I think everybody should just jump in and don't bother with the queue mechanism unless we get into something really heated.
Yeah, I just was wondering how we actually communicate about these things. So the role management part I actually can imagine, because this is essentially a brainstorming. But there are a few other things here that really essentially would need a prototype to talk about, because it's so hard to visualize. So this would need extensive preparation, and I'm just wondering how we could make those parts work.
Yeah, mock-ups, things of that nature. I mean, it's a good point, but we would, it fits in with it would require quite a bit of preparation to make a group conversation make sense. And maybe we should change the focus of it to be less about refactoring and talk less about what the changes in the code are, but talk specifically more about, have a workshop on how the data tracker can help you better, and bring some of these questions like, do we want to more carefully start tracking contributor affiliation? I'm going to stay away from the word author, even though that's what's in the thing, right? But this is a conversation that we could have with the community to find out, how if there's sensitivities, or what we would gain out of having a better sense of what organization somebody was affiliated with as they were contributing.
That came up in the discussion today was people would like to learn from data tracker when something specific happens. And I know that there are lots of little notification things in there and atom feeds and all that. But apparently people have trouble finding these, and also they are kind of unselective. So when you switch it on, you get a barrage of these things, and it's hard to get really informed about just the things you care about. So that's one thing that I would add to this, because getting notified about something is really one of the best things the data tracker can do for you.
Mm-hmm. So this is, if we did hold a workshop, it's pulling ideas like that out that I think would be a good part of the brainstorming. So let me go ahead and move forward and let's talk about some of the rest of these and see if they have a similar shape or if there's an obvious difference to them, and that might inform how we would work with some of the others. The next one in here is about document publication. I like to sum this thing up as the doc.ietf.org conversation. We have had many email threads about what should be authoritative for a given document, how people should be able to find documents, and how software should store documents and retrieve them. Improving search, the maybe improving accessibility. All right. So we could have as part of this conversation, you know, the argument over, do we want people to land on a metadata page, which is really what the RFC editor has been pushing for, or do we want our search, when people are just walking up to the system and trying to find something, do we give them the content of the document? So if this were held in a workshop, it would be kind of like a, you know, working group /BOF conversation where we brought that question, found proponents for each side, had a decent argument about it, and hopefully after the conversation would have a documented informed decision about what we might do more uniformly across all of our properties. Go ahead, Lars.
So a clarification question, because you say RFC is an internet draft. So is would this include rfceditor.org?
I think it would have to.
Okay. Because that's,
Well,
go
It
ahead.
might
Jay.
have a different answer. We could come up with on rfceditor.org, we do foo, and everywhere
So
else we do bar.
So I like that we're trying to include rfceditor.org, and I would love us to have a uniform something here, but I don't know if the RFC editor agrees. They have been very strongly leaning to this, for example, metadata landing page, right? And they seem to like that, and they don't seem to want to move away from it. But I think sort of at least the people I talked to on the IETF side sort of seem to want to, you know, give the content and maybe put the metadata somewhere else on that page.
can I just jump in there? The two are not inconsistent in any way. We have this language, I don't know if you've come across it, called JavaScript, that enables us to write a page that is both content and metadata. And the metadata can be configured, can be hidden, can pop down, can, you know, whiz
Sure.
out at us. We can.
I did the bootstrap stuff, so I know JavaScript. But the thing is, the rfceditor.org website is JavaScript free, as far as I know at the moment. And the question is, do they want to get with the times?
So so I think I slightly disagree with Robert. I think we might have to do the two separately here, because I think that the RFC editor one changes to that. We still need to understand what role the RSWG will have in that. You know, that's been discussed through the RFC Editor Future program, where the some of us have been trying to limit it to setting principles and strategy for how that website should work, not choosing the colors, but I think we need to go through that process to understand that. And one thing to add is that Greg and I are looking at doing an RFP for a UX design company to have on, permanent contract, so that we could work with them for something like the RFC editor site, which is going to be much more widely used and forward-facing than, say, Data Tracker, where we could potentially do that ourselves, if we wanted to. So, but in both cases, I think we really ought to consider trying to lose this dichotomy between a metadata landing page and a content page, and try to consider a design that solves people's tasks they want, which is a CBO.
Yeah, we would, so a quick segue, but we would probably also want to have some high-level ideas from this UX people for the data tracker, because like what Carsten talked about, right, there's different ways of getting notifications. But the data tracker is like organically grown over decades, and there's no unified methodology to anything really, right? It's basically some pages look new, some pages look old, and so somebody would need to like refactor that pretty heavily to make it work, right? And it's also like there's no reuse of any like components or anything like that. No. Over to different pages.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't saying that we want to keep the UX people out. Just if people are worried that we need to move ahead quicker, then we can potentially do that. But yes, I think UX design.
Yeah. To say something positive, though, I do like the blob storage, right? I mean, our most of our materials are like we turn them into key value things, right? So it's a natural way to store them, right? Nothing ever changes. We just create new versions, right? So this is exactly what a key value store is good at.
Yeah.
So I think people have a fairly good idea of what a workshop around this might look like. We could beat on its contents more. We started to slip into the kinds of conversations that we would have in the workshop there for a moment. But is this the right unit? Do we have a workshop where we focus on this question around having something like docs.ietf.org, or having a common feel across different properties for how things land? Or is there a better way to split that conversation up into different workshops?
This is Russ, and I was wondering if that isn't actually the topic of the first one you hold, is where do people want tools to go as a brainstorming session that then decides which other workshops to hold?
Liz, you want to capture that at the end of the document as a suggestion for another possible workshop, is just a general tools brainstorming session, a short one, just to give people an opportunity to come in with random ideas.
Exactly.
Okay, we're 25, we're almost 30 minutes.
Sorry, Robert, this is Alice. I just want to go back to what Lars said. So to clarify 2 points. One is the HTML for RFCs of the V3 era does use JavaScript to put the metadata header at the top, the gray box header. And there is some change to making the HTML, desire to make that HTML version be more prominent. And no one that I know of at the RFC Production Center has a strong tie to having the metadata page be the landing page, but that was the outcome of a long discussion regarding DOI, what the DOI resolves to. And if the DOI resolves to metadata at the top and HTML version of the RFC at the bottom, that we have no strong feelings against that. But there has been, as you know, multiple discussions about whether to go forward in that way. The Google Scholar indexing improvements are pointing to the HTML file itself, not the metadata page. So that would be a shift that we would see theoretically in Google Scholar search results in the near future. But I agree with you that there's some modernization to be. Also, the concept of how the metadata is displayed on a V3 era HTML RFC is different than how the metadata is displayed on an old one. So I like the idea of including the RFC editor, although I see Jay's point about the role of the RSWG in the future. But I think the workshop has more value when it includes RFCs as well as IDs.
Yeah, I agree. And sorry, I didn't mean to imply that the RPC was somehow like, you know, holding us back or had opinions that were like outdated or something. I tried to, like, John Levine specifically, right, seemed pretty opposed to the idea to move away from the landing page. I think it was actually, I was referring more than him than to the RPC. So sorry if that caused confusion. And thanks for clarifying.
The next on our list is a workshop about how people are using our mail list archive interfaces, the mailart.ietf, mailarchive.ietf.org, and IMAP, and how they interact with subscriptions. This would be the place where we would further refine the suggestion that Jay's made towards moving towards an integrated interface from the data tracker for subscription management into whatever our mail distribution system is.
Can I add something to that? It strikes me as odd that Mail Archive as a tool is doesn't tell you anything more about the mailing lists. So, you know, that there isn't a subscribe to the mailing list link from Mail Archive or a or anything else there. So as well as the subscription management stuff that I've done a design for, in order for us to think through it, not to intend it to be the final design. It would be useful to hear people's views about where we can go with integrating that with Mail Archive as well. You know, whether Mail Archive should sit alone or whether it should be, you know, effectively that once you have your I'm dealing with mail tool, you get archiving and management and subscription, all of that all together. And the second question I have is to understand whether we should aim to make the Mail Archive tool more than just a Mail Archive tool, but also have the Jabber logs within it and attempt to timeline or thread those so that you can see, you know, the messages, you know, in the sequence in which they arrived almost across those things, because quite often I think people are having sort of a semi-real-time conversation across Jabber and email, and is it possible for us to help people unpick that historically? So just two things I'm interested in, you know, more conversations about.
So my immediate reaction, this is Russ, is that the integration of Jabber is a very interesting idea. I think it'd be a real UI challenge, you know, but maybe, you know, if successful, might pay huge benefit. The subscription part I'm skeptical about because the search assumes that you want to search a whole bunch of lists. Because, you know, conversations sometimes migrate all over the place. We just had one that must have gone, you know, from the coin research group to the main list and off into, and ended up over in the IAB's architecture thread. Anyway, the point is to find those kinds of things, you need to search a group of lists. And so then when you've got hits on, you know, 10 different mail lists, which one do you want to subscribe to?
So this may come up in a minute as part of one of the other suggestions when we get down to it. I'd like to caution us not to dive too deep into the workshop, but I do want to add on to Jay's suggestion that we are exploring, at least thinking about, moving future chat to Zulip instead of Jabber. So if we did somehow integrate the historic Jabber logs into a conversation threaded view, we would also want to look at providing access to Zulip, and that might bring new challenges as different threading models become hard to reconcile. So I think I'm hearing interest in actually that this one is resonating. Having a conversation about the way people use and interact with the mail system is something that is people are resonating with even more strongly than just a conversation about, you know, how do you interact with the data tracker and want to make your interaction with the data tracker better. So we'll come back and prioritize these in a minute. The next one on this list is a biggie. Having a community. Go ahead.
So before we go into this, so I think everything else now is not sort of related so much to how a participant would interact with the system, which is why so do we have any? We don't run Google Analytics or anything else on the data tracker or mail archive, do we? So do we have any usage data about what people are doing on the? So it would be helpful in order to sort of decide where we like put the investment for these things if we decide to do some of them, right? To put them where most people will see the benefit.
Yeah, I think Greg
just announced we're going to head and start using at least Matomo's analytics over sites like the data tracker. And we will have that information available to us after some reasonable time period to get a valid sample set.
Okay, I think it would be good to have some idea of what sort of the most common usages are, so that we can sort of trade off whether we want to improve some of those versus something else. Obviously, it's not necessarily going to help us with like deciding on new functionality like Zulip or anything else, right? But at least in terms of what do we do about the stuff that we already offer, but we want to offer it in different ways. I think that might be helpful. Like for example, when it comes to HTML versus other formats. If we knew from rfcedit.org, right, click rates, right? Does anybody on the landing page, or what do they click on, or does it? And even very coarse-grained statistics, like for mail archive, I guess you don't have to be signed in, so we don't. It would be useful to know like which fraction of the community even uses it, right? And if they use it, what do they use it for? Do they basically just click on a link in a browser somewhere and they get shown the email and they go away, or do they actually like interact with the system, do the searches and all that stuff? I think that would be helpful.
So it sounds as though we could do with a session on Matomo and what analytics we have and things. I know from talking to Greg that we have a problem about how much can be shared publicly with Matomo, because of its security model. But we can certainly, I think having a conversation to understand what people want to see will be very useful, because we can understand whether we give people logins or whether we try to build something that makes it public or or even just understand how we use it.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, like when the Bootstrap 5 stuff, right? So we have in the data tracker, it's the search functionality on the landing page. There's also a search thing in the top menu bar. And then there's the pull down where you can search for like all kinds of complicated queries. And it's not fully clear to me like what is used to what degree, right? So is it actually worthwhile to really like work on the detailed query API, or is everybody just type in a document title and like dealing with the results? So I think those are the things would be useful to understand when it comes to some of these improvements.
Should we add in a Matomo data collection session?
We could put a note
So I
at
don't
the
know.
end of it, but I don't know if that's a get the community in kind of thing, or if that's just a, we have some core part of our team go in and do detailed work there.
I don't know if it would be useful for everybody to understand the details here, right? But I think it would be enough to know that we have some data, and if I have a question like this, I can go and ask like you guys, and you can tell me, or you can tell me we don't have that data. But I don't know if everybody needs to understand what is there and how to query it and all of that. And I would also trust you guys to just tell me, like, this thing isn't used, so we want to remove it from the data tracker.
The other thing we could do is we could have at some point later a general session on all of the performance monitoring and monitoring services that we have. So Scout APM as well as Matomo.
I don't want to throw in performance because that's very different, right? I was mostly sort of trying to figure, I was trying to use this to drive our investment in the changes we want to make.
So take the word performance out, but we could have a general thing about our monitoring, services that we have and what people want to see, what visibility they want of things.
The observability buzzword is rising again, and we could have a conversation about what our observability is and what it should be.
Yeah, but I didn't want to derail the continuation of the discussion, so I just thought I interject this here because the rest I think that you're getting into now isn't necessarily directly related to people using our system.
Yeah, there's more that is. I guess the IT infrastructure service thing is maybe different enough that let me skip forward and talk about the search and search engine optimization workshop, and then we'll come back and talk about the IT infrastructure workshop. So we've winged several things that are contained in this proposal for a workshop in others, right? Lars, even with what you mentioned, how are people using the search stuff that is built into the data tracker? And do we want to have something that unifies search across all of these platforms, at least at a high level, and then feeds you into more detailed search and the application specific search mechanism in a friendlier way to actually let people achieve what they're wanting to achieve. There are proposals that we've had in the past about standing up something that would use something like Elasticsearch that had data feeds from all of our properties that with an interface on top of it that would let you quickly find likely relevant stuff, get you into the right application to find more details. And then using something like that, or whether you had it or not, putting a lot of effort into tuning how the engines are interacting with us so that when people are using the external search mechanisms, they land on more relevant results more quickly. So would a workshop that just focused on search and search engine optimization be something that would be fruitful? Do you think we'd get good input from the community around having a conversation with this being the lens about what we're talking about?
I think it's good topics. I don't know if it's one workshop because search and SEO are two different things, right? One is like how do you optimize for an external search that indexes your stuff, and the other one is how do you provide search internally to our applications. And there's not obviously to me like a whole connection between those, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I guess if there is a connection, it's that the SEO could leverage a better internal search mechanic. You would just focus the SEO on the thing that's providing better search internally. All right, so then jumping back to the IT infrastructure, we do want to move to a world where we have better reproducibility of the things that we're deploying, that we have better insight into how the things that are deployed are running, the ability to scale horizontally when we need to scale without necessarily having to have a lot of manual intervention in this. And we have been accruing a set of things that we have been asking AMS to do that needs to be informed by a better vision for where we want to land. And we need to have a clear set of goals, a clear pattern that we're moving forward for the way we evolve our infrastructure services over the next couple of years. And we really need to develop this clear picture as early as we can. So a workshop around this, I think we would bring in people that have done transformations, have led transformations in enterprise environments or other small to large organizations, to talk about what's worked well for them, what technologies that we might want to use, what are better strategies for using external services might look like. You know, I'm envisioning somebody that has started to make really good use of Ansible to come in and talk about what the challenges are when you're making a transformation into a system that's using Ansible as a primary tool for its automation. What other topics might land in this? And Lars, I'm really sensitive to the bike shed thing here, where somebody just comes in and says, "Oh, don't use any of this stuff. Just everything should go, exist on Google Docs and GitHub, and we're just done," right? I don't think that trying to argue against that kind of solution would be a good use of time.
I'm not so worried about bike shedding here, actually. I don't actually see a lot of other viable alternatives, but maybe I'm optimistic.
So if I could add, just so that if people haven't read the notes that well, so we've put AMS and Glenn, through that effectively on notice to say that we want to change the nature of the contract we have with them from a black box contract to a contract where the community has much more say in specifying the nature of this of the service that's provided. The three key areas that we've identified there, basically the virtualization strategy, the build strategy, and the monitoring strategy, are all three key areas where there's been a lot of feedback from people, or either from the community or from internally within the various teams, about people who interact with these things, that's where they'd like to see some significant changes. So this is something that we some of this direction is already set, to be blunt. We are going to move towards automated proper build using build languages and that kind of stuff. The question is, how, which ones, how do we end up with everything, all the build scripts stored in GitHub, that sort of stuff. We are going to end up with a different monitoring solution. The question is, what standards do we use? How do we do that? What access do people have to it? Those sort of things. And we are going to end up with a different virtualization strategy. And the question is, that. So this is why Robert said that we want people who've done this before, as much as possible, to help involve, because ultimately I think we're quite comfortable, those of us on the tool side, simply specifying all of this and expecting it delivered by Glenn, and his team. But I think that we are very much keen to involve other people's skills, expertise, and other things, rather than just go down that route. So this is one that could have a lot of momentum behind it quite quickly if required. Thanks, Robert.
All right, so skim back through the set that we've got here. Are these all the same kinds of things? Does it make sense to continue to talk about them as things that we would prioritize from a single set? Do we need to break these things into separate sets and approach them differently? After the conversation that we've had, has this sparked any other ideas about things that we need to add? So I'd like to get a feel for, if nobody's having reactions to that, we'll continue to work with these as a single bucket of things. Let's talk about priorities and timing. I'm expecting all of these to require a significant amount of time from hopefully more than one person for preparation to get them ready to go and to follow through afterwards and turn the result into an artifact that will actually be useful for guiding our development work going forward. What pace do we want to try to have these things at? Is this one between every meeting? Do we try to do one a month? What's the speed that you think these can be digested in? I'd like to just throw out the initial proposal.
Once a month seems too much, but I would hate to see it as part of the IETF agenda. So maybe staggered, halfway between each one.
Yeah, I was anticipating that they would not happen during a meeting.
Okay.
The question is, if we try to do one between each meeting? Do we try to do two between each meeting? Or, the 3 between each meeting we're hearing is probably too much.
Right, 1 or 2, depending how much prep they end up taking.
that means that even with the list that we've got here, we've outlined nearly a couple of years worth of conversations.
Can I ask then, Russ or any others, are there any of these that you think you would be happy for us to get on with as BAU and keep the community up to date with, you know, produce more detailed plans rather than have workshops with or anything like that?
I guess the mail list archive one jumps out at me, that we went through so much community discussion about it. And then when we coupled that with the ability to do the IMAP or a mounting of the archives, it just feels lower priority than some of the other things.
Anyone else have a view on that? Michael? Oh, he's jumped. He's gone now. Carsten, a view?
It was distracted.
So just Carsten, just wondering if any of those things on the list there are things you would be happy for the tools team just to get on with, rather than and keep the community engaged and about our plans and stuff, but rather than us need to have a workshop first.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy if the tools team can do their work. So whenever such a workshop becomes an opportunity for people to meddle with stuff and make stuff more complicated, that's a problem. I think that has been said before in this meeting. So I think we have to be a little bit selective. So I can imagine having a workshop about IT strategy, but it should be pretty selective in who you actually invite to that. I can much more imagine having workshops about things that people are trying to do in the IETF and either do not get enough support from the tools or actually are being actively hindered by the tools. That makes sense. Brainstorming, looking at mock-ups, and so on. That might work well, but these workshops should not have any normative character.
Okay, thank you. So Robert, maybe for some of these, such as the infrastructure one, we could have a project team and open project meetings that anyone from the community can join, but we don't need to go through with a specific workshop in order to do that. We just, you know, started as a project, and we obviously try to bring in those people with this expertise, some of the NOC people, those sort of thing, so that they're there. But otherwise, we could potentially try it that way.
It of course depends a lot on whether we need a big bang or can do this iteratively. So a project team can probably do things in an iterative fashion quite well. Doing a complete remake probably requires some more planning and some more drawing in of expertise.
Okay. Thanks.
Russ, I know you need to go very shortly. Do you have anything else that you want to throw in before you have to leave? Not hearing anything from Russ. Tom, I thank you for joining as well. Haven't heard from you yet. Do you think we're on a good trajectory here? Is there something else you think we should be pursuing?
just wanted to kind of keep an eye on what you guys were talking about. I've voiced my things I would like to see on the mailing list a few times, but they aren't generally things people want, or don't seem to be things people want. So, like archiving of the meetings in separate streams that can be recombined and things. I think that things should be application oriented, the features you work on. And so if there's an application that someone wants to do, then you have the backend support for that. And changing the backend before you know what the applications are, just trying to guess what they are, probably isn't as productive. So you might want to say, hey, what applications are people working on, or what ones would you like to do, but you can't do to drive some of the changes to the data tracker.
All right. Well, thank you.
I think that's a pretty interesting input. So I just remembered that I wanted to say that I do much of my work by simply pulling all the gigabytes I can get out of the IETF system and doing things locally on my laptop, which kind of works for me, but maybe is not a strategy that everyone wants to go after.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of people that do that though. And I don't think we'll lose the requirement to make it easy to pull all that information out.
Well, there's some things that you just can't get today. You know, like today when Meet Echo does a meeting and they are, you know, changing slides, it would be nice to have change timestamps for when the slides were changed. It would be nice to have like a feed of the speaker information or stuff like that. But that all requires Meet Echo to collaborate and to provide the stuff separately. And today, the only thing that you get is this YouTube that everything's combined in, and that's all there is. So you can't download certain things.
I think I can capture a note to keep a place where, you know, there have been suggestions for access to information that we don't have and make those easy to find. So I think from the discussion that we've had, we've decided that we would take the infrastructure services conversation through a different track than workshops. Then we go find a team to work this and start working it iterative on a separate track than what we're doing with the workshops in general. Given that, which of these workshops should we try to attack early? Which just assuming that the work on the infrastructure services is going to happen in parallel. Which of the proposals do we have here do we think needs we would benefit from covering earlier rather than later? Anybody have like upvotes? You know, really want to see one particular thing happen, get involved in it quickly. I'll take Alexi's, you know, proxy for what he wanted to participate in as arguments for having things earlier.
And afterwards.
Sorry, Jay, you were cut off at the beginning.
Sorry, we could send a poll round afterwards,
Okay.
just because we'll have broader participation than just those of us on this call then, and just ask people their priorities.
Use that ranking system that Michael's had so much experience with. Get the weighted preferences. I don't know if Michael's still on the call. Nope, he dropped. He's used this with several nomcoms. The way the nomcoms internally would pull their votings together would do what the many Canadian governments use for their voting system. Okay, well, I will send such a poll out. I think the other takeaway we've gotten from this is that we would only try to do 1 or 2 of these between meetings. So let's plan, given that we're going to have this poll happening, just set our expectations that we'll have one between 1:13 and 1:14, because I think that's a fairly short in between meeting time. And that we'll work out from there. Anybody have anything else they want to try to cover today? I want to thank everybody for the time that they've put into this.
So would I. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
There's 2 mute buttons. That's very confusing.
Yeah. We'll eventually get through that. All right. Well, with that, then I think we're done for today.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.